You're listening to the Patriot Nation Podcast.
All right, welcome into another edition of the Patriot Nation Podcast, presented, of course, by FanDuel, the official sports wagering partner of CLNS Media. Go to FanDuel.com/Boston to sign up today. And Matt, it's been a great weekend of football, but I just have two words for you, Matt. Just two very simple words. And those words are perhaps Buffalo's favorite words, apparently. Wide right. Oh, it's gorgeous. Oh, it's delicious. It's delicious.
It's so funny because it was just, especially once they started playing for the kick, and it's Buffalo. You know it's windy. You know it's cold. It's not that short of a field goal. And the second they flashed that graphic that said he was, 9 of 9 on game tying or game winning kicks in the final 2 minutes or whatever it was.
You know it's coming.
Yeah, I feel bad for the kicker because that is brutal. But
it's
the Bills, yet again this happening to them, it's hilarious. And the fact that they cannot get over the Chiefs, everything about that fourth quarter was wild. That was a weird quarter of football.
Yeah. You know what? And it was, you felt like the Chiefs, I mean, they do that. The Bills did that ridiculous. I don't know what the hell they were doing with that fake punt. It was insane to me.
So I don't think they mentioned this on the broadcast. The Chiefs only had 10 men on the field for it.
It's crazy.
They didn't get a full 11 out there. So I think the Bills may have seen that and kind of audibled into, we have a man advantage. We're going to do this.
I think it's dumb.
I mean, if you're going to go for it, I don't hate the idea, but if you do it, you got to get it. And that's that was like 4th and 5.
The other thing for me is if you're going to go for it, you have Josh freaking Allen, dude. What are you doing? Like, he's been unstoppable all night long running the ball. Like, maybe don't drop a design run for him, but roll him out and see what happens. Like, I don't get taking the ball out of his hands. But then, fine. Chiefs take over at the 30. They drive right down, not even drive. They get right down the field because of a Pacheco run. And then they throw it to friggin' McCole Harbin on that stupid end around thing. And it was like, what are you doing? And, he reaches for the goal line because he's a dummy. Fumbles out of the end zone, which, of course, everyone hates that rule. I don't mind that rule. I do think you could adjust it. And you could say, okay, you keep possession, but you get 1st and 10 at the 20-yard line.
I think any fumble forward and out of bounds should just come back to where the ball was fumbled. Like, that's kind of my take on that. And if you want to do that and give the ball to the defense instead, that's fine by me. But I feel like it should be the same. I don't think a defense should get rewarded for letting a team get all the way down to the goal line and then the offense messes up. Like, if you want to stop the offense, do it earlier. Don't rely on failing the
I like that idea a lot. So the idea is that oh man, that's really fascinating, dude. Is that instead of getting the ball at the 20 because of a touchback, you get the ball at like the 1-yard line or wherever they fumbled from. That is a fascinating idea. I like that a lot better than something else.
Well, in any other circumstance, a fumbled ball forward that doesn't get recovered comes back to the spot where it was fumbled.
Sure.
So I think that logic should exist across the board. And then the ball either goes to the offense or the defense. I don't really care. I think you can make an argument either way and I'll buy it. But I just don't like that the touchback part of it doesn't make any sense to me because, like, the ball goes forward anywhere else, it just comes back. Why would it be different there? It's not.
Right. Well, I guess the idea is that they're taking, but they're not even taking possession. I don't know. I see.
If nobody gets the ball, then
right.
I don't feel like there should be some big drastic change in what happened. Like
if they had recovered it, then that's a different story. Then you get a touchback, right? But if it goes out of bounds,
but you have to
That's a fascinating that and they would never ever ever do that, but I think that's fascinating. So, anyways, Berg said it too. Like I'm just celebrating. I'm just enjoying Buffalo, the misery of Buffalo. And look, I get that Mahomes is is lights out in the playoffs. He's doing something that only Brady has really done. And he's been incredible. He's been incredible, and he's the only guy realistically that has any chance of catching Tom Brady, right? But Brady has 7 rings, and Mahomes has 2, and Brady's 2-0 against Mahomes in the playoffs. So like, it's still you look at it and you say, okay, I still don't know if we can make him the GOAT over Brady no matter what happens. But
yeah.
So I don't know.
I'm not worried about that conversation either, because like you said, like we're 4 Super Bowl wins away from even starting to have an actual conversation, I think.
Right.
And like, I don't know, and I also look at where the Chiefs are right now. They got a little bit lucky at points today. They had a really sloppy game, and they benefited from a Bills defense that is not very good right now because of how injured they are. That's not how this is going to look next week. The Ravens are a much, much better defense at every single level than what the Bills present right now. And like the way I look at this, I think we're almost definitely getting both 1 seeds in the Super Bowl. The Lions look like they have some vulnerabilities. The Chiefs have vulnerabilities.
And we'll get into the games. I don't want to spend a ton of time on the games because I do want to get into the OC stuff. But like, San Fran looked beatable. They looked beatable.
They did.
Now, that doesn't mean they're going to get beat, but they looked beatable. And so, look, I mean, I can't help myself. I have to root for the Lions. I have to. Like, how could you not root for the Lions?
I can't.
Why?
If I'm being honest, it's petty, but I think they're doing it this week. The Lions have decided that their favorite uniforms are the all-white ones. It's just no stripes on them, and it's like it looks like their team manager went out, like forgot the pants, went out to a Kohl's and grabbed leggings for the team, and I'm just like, that should not be rewarded.
Yeah. Hey man, listen.
I also do not like Jared Goff. I'm a Jared Goff hater. It's not personal. It's completely petty. He's a very good quarterback, but I just have we already saw him lose a Super Bowl. I'm not interested in seeing this again.
Right, but I want them to win the Super Bowl. So that's the thing. I'll tell you though, and so let's get into the San Fran game because we can start and kind of go chronologically because San Fran was the first game.
No,
that's not true. That's not true. Baltimore was the first game. Do we have to even talk about Baltimore, Houston? I mean, Houston was a nice little story. They played their butts off this year. CJ Stroud looks legit. Nico Collins looks legit. And D'Amico Ryans is a good coach, but they just don't. I mean, Baltimore's a wagon. They just didn't have it. And so, Baltimore cruises in. And so to me, it becomes one of those situations where I look at it and just say, there's no way. There's, hey, they did what they could. Baltimore wiped the floor with them. And it's funny, I had Houston covering and you had Green Bay covering, and that's what happened. So I was completely off on Saturday. And I actually was 0 for 3 before this game. So
oh my God. Yeah.
I had a bad week as usual, gambling.
Those drives in the second half from the Ravens, it reminded me of the 0-4 Pats against the Colts in that game, where it was just controlling the clock, mowing them down, and completely controlling the game. With those two, the Pats had 2 really long scoring drives, touchdown drives against the Colts in 0-4, and I think the Ravens had 3 in the second half. And it was just, once they're on, that running game is so hard to stop. And especially when you have the threat of the pass like they do. And now I think you're going to have Mark Andrews coming back. So the Texans, they maxed out what they could do this year. They got good stuff for the future. We're going to see what they do this offseason. They're coming to New England next year. So that's going to be an interesting test for Gerard Mayo there. But Ravens far and away the better team.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to, right? Is that, it's not they're a better team. And I think they're the best team in the NFL. Now, they could certainly lose to the Chiefs next week. I think they're going to beat the Chiefs that's just my opinion. But, they're the best team in the NFL. So,
yeah, I agree.
But
especially, I thought they were number 2, and then they went out to San Francisco and beat them, and that was kind of all right. You're number 1 until you show that you aren't, and they still look like number one.
Yeah. And so that's kind of it. So, and then the night game was a San Fran game again, and someone said it in, where the heck is it? Hold on. Okay, Ashton said it. Purdy did impress me last night. I don't think Purdy impressed anyone last night. He played like crap.
Yeah.
But at the end of the game, when it mattered, and when they needed it, and when they absolutely had to have it, he drove them down and they won the game. And to me, that's one of those things that I look at and just say, like, okay, I don't know if he's that good or if he's just surrounded by a ton of talent. I don't know. But the guy's a gamer, man. He plays his ass off. He had a solid year this year. And the one thing that everyone's been complaining about is that he can't come back at the end of games. Well, he has a terrible game on Saturday. He was objectively bad. He played poorly on Saturday night.
Yeah.
And then when it came down to it, and when the game was on the line, he drove them down and they won the game. And that, to me, that shows me something. Now, again, that doesn't mean he's a top 5 quarterback or a top 10 quarterback or any of that stuff. But like, for me, to fight through a bad game and still win, that to me is huge.
He's got mental toughness. He's a gamer. Yep. I think Brock Purdy is somewhere in the average tier of quarterbacks, which I think is a pretty wide bar of quarterbacks. But he's not a game manager. He's actually pretty reckless with the ball. He's more Matt Stafford than Alex Smith when he's out there. And he's fun to watch. It's just, when he's not on, some of the decisions are really bad and some of the throws get really inaccurate. There's even a little Josh Allen to his game in that regard. But yeah, he can get away with it because the guys around him are so good that the risks are lower than they are usually, because they can erase bad plays and the good plays end up going for 6. Christian McCaffrey too was fantastic. The defense was really rough at points, but did enough. And I think the common thread in both of the NFC games that we saw, that game last night and then the Lions-Bucks this afternoon, is both road teams had every opportunity to win that game and left too many points on the field. Mm-hmm. Both teams struggled when they got into scoring range, had a couple of turnovers, missed field goals, things that you just can't have on the road against a better team in the playoffs. And that was the difference. I mean, we're not that far off here from having a Lions-Packers NFC championship game or a Bucks-Packers NFC championship game with how the end of those games went. But the better team got the breaks to go their way at the end by just a slim margin there, and sets up what I think should be a fun NFC championship game. I think we saw the Niners defense seems to be gashable in the running game, and the Lions will take advantage of that. And the Lions secondary is horrendous, so San Fran should score.
You would think.
It'll probably be close. I think San Francisco is going to win. I'm going to take both home teams, but a pair of fun games in the NFC, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to, right? And again, Detroit today. So Detroit this morning played, or not this morning, but this afternoon played another emotional game. Of course, you're going up, and you're trying to win. I mean, it was a back and forth game. It really wasn't super well played. I mean, it was, but it wasn't like I wasn't blown away by either team. Let's put it to you that way. The one guy I was blown away by was freaking Jahmyr Gibbs is an absolute monster. He's a superstar. And that's one of those things where, like, we all pan that pick at number 12. What are you doing drafting a running back at 12 and so on and so forth? He's not just a running back. He's catching the ball to the backfield. What he did to Antoine Winfield Jr., he made the man look slow. And
the shadow realm.
Right. And so to me, that's hard. It's hard for me to look at that and say, we were all wrong. We were all wrong about the Lions. Because you talk about Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta in the same draft.
Yeah.
Right. And Jack, what the hell is his name?
Campbell.
Jack Campbell and Brian Branch. That's one hell of a draft. That's one hell of a draft.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that we saw, Brian Branch comes into this because of the slot blitzes the Lions were bringing. But I think one of the things we saw across the board in all 4 playoff games this weekend too was how much you can throw out the regular season, because defensively, once you have the full scout on the offense, you can throw all kinds of weird stuff out there. And I think we
Yeah.
saw the Packers defense. I mean, the Packers fans have wanted their defensive coordinator fired all season long. He
Yeah.
has not done a good job. He's the only guy that made Bryce Young look good. When they came out there back-to-back weeks with really well-designed defenses that did a really good job. You saw the Lions, who have had a really rough defense at points this season, figure out ways to get to Tampa and generate pressure. And for the Bills and the Chiefs, we saw some really good defense at points. They were scheming stuff up. And, you know, when they say defense wins championships, and I think we saw this weekend that it isn't necessarily about how good your defense is overall. It's about your ability to generate kind of these specific game plans for big moments and having guys who are smart enough to figure out what the opposing team wants to do and take it away. Look at the Packers against the Cowboys. I mean, that was the textbook example of just being everywhere that Dak wanted to throw the ball every time he wanted to throw the ball because they knew what the tendencies were and they were able to jump things. And we look forward for the Patriots. And I think defensive personnel matters in terms of talent, but it also matters in terms of how smart and how well coached the guys are and what's going on, you know, in the head and what you're able to figure out there. And I think Pats have a lot going on there.
Yep.
The infrastructure too, depending on who stays. And I think the Patriots can design a defense as good as any of the ones we've seen this weekend in a playoff game if the offense can get them to that point.
Right. Well, and that's what it comes down to, right? And again, if you had even a mediocre offense this year with the defense that you had, even with all the injuries, you're talking about the Steelers. You're the Steelers, right? And maybe even better than the Steelers, right? And so that's something for me that I think is interesting. All right, so let's get to the last game. And I think Cody mentioned it, and a few other people have mentioned it before. But, I mean, I don't know if Sean McDermott's going to get fired. I don't know if Sean McDermott's going to get fired. By the way, Gerard Mayo. Gerard Mayo's bringing out the snowflakes, man. People do not like the fact that he talks about diversity and is okay with talking about it. It's not okay to talk about diversity. It's not okay. You got to remember that. It's not okay to talk about diversity. We don't want to talk about diversity here. It's not okay. All right? We just got to remember that. So just file that away, Matt. Next time anyone mentions anything about diversity, we got to shut them down right away. It's not okay to talk about that. It's not all right. So just so we're all on the same page about that, do not discuss diversity. It's not okay. This is a football podcast. We're not supposed to be talking about diversity and racism. We're not supposed to be talking about that stuff. So we got to.
They aren't human beings playing this sport.
What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna send a message to Gerard Mayo. I'll just send him an email and be like, hey, listen, I host a prominent Patriots podcast, super prominent. We have like 200. We have like 200 subscribers. Please stop talking about like diversity. Please, like, come on. Anyways, so anyways, but the Bills, and honestly, this is where we're at with the Bills. I don't know if we're going to get to a Sean McDermott firing. I don't know if we're going to, but I really think that it becomes a situation where I don't know if they can get any further with Sean McDermott. I don't know if they can do that. They might be able to, but I just don't know if they can. And that's the hard thing for me.
Well, this is the third team now. We were kind of talking about the head coach we know he's good, but can he get us over the hump way? And we see the Cowboys stick by Mike McCarthy, and seems like the Eagles are sticking by Nick Sirianni. So now Sean McDermott's up, and it's tough because it's such a weird season for the Bills, and it's been 2 weird seasons here. You know, I think they got really unlucky with the injuries that they sustained on defense early in the season. I think Sean McDermott deserves a lot of credit for the way they were able to redesign the defense into something good. I think the fact that it played kind of poorly at points tonight is just they got re-injured again. You know, the important pieces in the way they figure things out now are hurt. And, you know, at a certain point you run out of bodies and guys who can do things at a high level. Firing the offensive coordinator to me mid-season was such a weird move. And, you know, the offense isn't why they lost this really. You can't really pin it on any one thing. I think Sean McDermott's a good coach. I don't know if he's a great coach. And I wouldn't want to be the one making this call. I'll tell you that much, because I think he's done a lot of the right things. And he's also done some very strange things in a lot of ways there in Buffalo. And I don't. And the other thing is, you look at, I think we'll bring up the Bill Belichick of it all. If the Bills were to hire him instead, I think he makes that defense better immediately. But given what we've seen in New England the last couple of seasons, how do you feel about Josh McDaniels coming into to coach Josh Allen? That's a pairing that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think those guys are very compatible at all. And if that's what you're going to insist on, if Matt Patricia is suddenly back in here as defensive coordinator, given recent track records, if you're the Bills owner, I think that would be a very, very risky move in a business where decision makers are usually very conservative about the decisions we make. I don't think they're going to rip the Band-Aid off.
Well, and that's a great point. That's a great point. And so I don't know what's going to happen. And this is so Mike Larry. Here we are. That Atlanta's still doing interviews, and I thought Belichick was a lock there. I think the reason why he isn't is because of the situation that we're dealing with right now. It seems like Sirianni is still in. I guess I'm not really sure.
They just announced that the Sean Desai's out as defensive coordinator. So I would assume if they're announcing coordinator things, not head coach things, that usually means the head coach is staying.
Yeah, it sure does seem that way. And so you have to assume that Sirianni is going to stay. Mike McCarthy's staying, but now this is the next job. No one's taken the Atlanta job yet because they want to make sure that they get all of the information they can get. Right.
Yep.
This game ends. If Buffalo's looking at this saying Sean McDermott's not the guy, and they fire him, that instantly becomes the number one job, obviously. Right. And so, with that offense and the players that they have on defense, that to me is huge. And so I look at that and I just it becomes an issue for me that I look at it and I just say okay, that's interesting. That becomes the number one job. And so no one's accepting that Atlanta job yet, because if they accept the Atlanta job and then the Bills job comes open and the Bills are like, hey, man, we would have hired you. You're like, oh, my God, what am I doing? You know what I mean? So,
So, well, I think the other thing, too, that's interesting, if you're the Falcons, is Bill Belichick the best coach on the market for you right now? You're a team that has struggled offensively.
Yep.
And it looks like Jim Harbaugh is on the market. A guy who has taken teams to the Super Bowl, a guy who's good at developing young quarterbacks, a guy, we talk about the Ravens on here. You know where that Ravens defensive coordinator came from? He's been at Michigan the last couple of years before this. That's where he did a lot of that stuff. And it's, if you're a team that wants to plan for the long-term future, not just the short-term future, and you have the opportunity to hire a coach who just won a national championship in college and whose style of defense is what may win the Ravens a Super Bowl here in part, and you're a quarterback away, and this guy's quarterback is in the draft, and you have a chance to continue that relationship. And I also think the personnel they have in Atlanta fits what Jim Harbaugh likes to do offensively. So I think there's a very real possibility here that Bill Belichick gets left at the altar and doesn't get a job, which is crazy to say, but it feels possible.
Well, the hard thing is that he's 72, right? And I don't know if that feedback, by the way, is coming. The echo, I don't know if it's coming from me or from you, but I don't know. I don't know if he's 72. He wants to go in a situation where he can win. And the team that's bringing him in needs to feel like we're good enough that we can realistically compete right now. And I don't know who's in that spot, right? I don't know who's in. Buffalo's in that spot, obviously. Philly's in that spot. Dallas is in that spot. Is Atlanta in that spot? Maybe. If Atlanta gets a quarterback, they might be in that spot. But who's the quarterback going to be? Maybe if Atlanta says, maybe maybe Bill Belichick's saying, hey, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to throw a bag at Kirk Cousins. We're going to sign Kirk Cousins, right? We throw an absolute bag at him, sign him. I'm going to bring in McDaniels, and all of a sudden our offense is going to be, I'm going to fix the offense, and don't worry about the defense. I'll take care of the defense, right? And so, and again, I don't know if that matters, but it's like it's a tough sell when a 72-year-old coach is saying, "All right, I'm gonna make this team a champion team," right? And that's
In a
hard
short window.
unless again you feel like we're literally a coach away.
Yeah,
You know?
and it could be, and it's. I think if you're Arthur Blank, you got to be sitting there because you're going to be getting that argument from Bill. But I'm sure Jim Harbaugh is saying, "Hey, you're a quarterback away. I'm a decade younger than Bill Belichick. I can draft the quarterback I've had a good relationship with, and I'll coach him for the next decade for your team, and we're going to go win 5 Super Bowls or whatever because he's going to be
Right.
ambitious about it."
Yep.
And it's about how big you want your window to be. So yeah, it's a lot of moving parts here that I think are very interesting. And the other thing here is, Jim Harbaugh can go back to college. And this isn't the Falcons aren't the only team interested in him. And the Falcons are interviewing everybody right now. I think if Bill Belichick were a lock there, they wouldn't be interviewing all these guys. They would have wrapped up interviews and just
You would think so. Yeah.
hand up a blank check and said, "All right, when you're ready, give us a call. We'll put the number here and get to work." And it doesn't seem like that's how they're approaching it. So they're clearly not convinced that he is going to come, or they're not convinced that they want him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And so, so we'll see. But there's a lot of dominoes that are going to fall. I wonder if the dominoes that fall, will happen this week. I wonder if it'll happen next week. It feels like this week is the week, right? Doesn't it? Like it feels like this is the week that things are going to start moving. Obviously, the coordinators that are playing still can't accept jobs yet, but you feel like that this is the week that things are going to happen. And so, I think we'll find out by the end of the week whether Belichick will be coaching the Falcons, whether Jim Harbaugh will be coaching the Falcons, and if Belichick gets a job and where it will be. Tennessee's an interesting spot. But Tennessee just let go of Mike Vrabel, who kind of is similar to Belichick. So you wonder, they probably don't want him again.
They've been interviewing some weirder people there, and it seems like they want to go for like a younger offensive assistant type or something.
Yeah.
I don't think Bill's going to be the guy, and I think maybe the Chargers then if the Atlanta job isn't there, but we haven't heard any links there, have we? I mean, Bill hasn't interviewed, and
no,
nothing on that front.
Yeah, I'm not even sure who's gonna take that job. So there's a lot of talk about Harbaugh wanting that job because he has Herbert, right? And that makes sense. And so we'll see what happens. But the one thing, so before we leave the games, of course, we talked about Mahomes, right? And so my dad texted me this little stat, so I figured I'd share it with you. Brady has 59 fourth quarter or overtime comebacks while losing or tied. It just as a Patriot. Never mind what he did with the Bucs. 59 as a Patriot in the fourth quarter, losing or tied. And then the other one for me is in the Super Bowl. In the Super Bowl, Brady has 10 drives in the fourth quarter that changed the score of the game, that changed the lead of the game. So either tied the game or took the lead. 10 in the fourth quarter overtime.
And Brady left the field in the fourth quarter with a lead in how many Super Bowls did he end up playing in? Was it 10?
He played in 10.
Yeah.
And he left with a lead in 9, yeah? No, that's not true.
I think it must be 9 because he didn't in the Falcons one. They never led in the fourth quarter.
But he left with the lead because they won.
No, I mean he left the field. Like he led his team to score in the fourth quarter.
That's what I mean.
Because he never led in the fourth quarter of that game is what I'm saying.
Are you saying in the fourth quarter?
Yeah.
Well, the Giants game, they got the ball back after they scored.
No, I'm saying at any point in the fourth quarter. In both Giants Super Bowls, they had a lead in the fourth quarter. Yep. And in the Eagles one, I believe they had a lead in the fourth quarter, and all the ones they won except for the Falcons one, they had a lead in the fourth quarter, which is just he put his team in position to win every single Super Bowl he was in.
Right. And that's, I think it's interesting. And so to me, when you talk about Mahomes trying to catch Brady and what Brady's done, 28-3 is incredible. Shocking the world is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Those things go down in history, right? Those are historically good moments. Coming back against the best defense. And again, the Legion of Boom, if they hold on and win that Super Bowl, that's considered the greatest defense of all time in back-to-back Super Bowls, they would have beaten Peyton Manning and Tom Brady in back-to-back Super Bowls, and they would have won back-to-back games. That's wild. Like that would have been that would be the number one defense of all time. And because they lost, they destroyed that whole team. That one loss destroyed the entire Seahawks franchise, right?
One play call.
And so that's one of those things. That's fascinating, right? And so, I don't know. Now the other thing, and Patriots Loco pointed this out too, and this is a little bit off topic, but Andy Reid might be retiring at the end of the season. Imagine Bill Belichick in Kansas City.
Well, the other name I think about there is Eric Bieniemy. If he doesn't end up staying in Washington, would be a really interesting one to see him.
Well, they all lobbied for him. Mahomes loved him. They all. It does make sense for him going back there. So, but you know what I mean. So, and Nick On's trying to argue that Brady had a better defense. So I agree. I assume that's satire, but we'll see. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, maybe
it's not.
I mean, you can't do Brady versus. Mahomes until Mahomes at least passes Montana. Like you got to get through that first. So I'm not even. I'm not entertaining the debate. I'm not.
How about we worry about him passing Eli Manning first? Okay.
Yeah.
So
that's we're not there yet. So he's a fantastic quarterback. This isn't taking anything away from him. He's young. He's very good at what he does. Yeah, like he's excellent. We'll see how this goes. We don't have to make the decision right now. NFL careers are long, and we can We can wait for more information before we make that argument.
Exactly. All right, let's take a break. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about the offensive coordinator position. We'll talk a little bit about the defensive coordinator position because they've already kind of started looking at candidates for that one. Offensive coordinator, I think, is fascinating as well. So we'll get into that when we come back from the break, and then we'll go from there. All right. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, find bets in the new Explore tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino, LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, New Jersey, Iowa, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelpline.ma.org or call 1-800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts. Or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. All right, my sister just sent me a video of of a Chiefs fan who set up like a fan on the side of his TV when they lined up for the field goal.
Oh my goodness!
It went wide right, so they're all flipping out because
I'm gonna go watch some. There's some good TikToks I watched before bed tonight of reactions. But before we get into it, we'll talk about that game. One last thing about it.
Yeah,
I love Jason Kelce, man. Him shirtless going into the crowd to chug beers after his brother scores a touchdown. Like it's awesome. That's fantastic. I feel like Jason Kelce and like Edelman and Gronk, if they're all retired here and Kelce retires, could have their own show, just like road tripping to different stadiums, drinking beer and talking about football and commentating on games. Like I've watched that.
Oh yeah. And you know what? And the thing about him is that they do seem like genuinely nice dudes. They really do. And like, that the podcast and it's a podcast. So like, you don't know how real it is, but it seems pretty real.
They seem like
right. And and you see kind of their interaction, the way they talk and the way they interact with each other. It's fascinating. And so that to me is fun. But he had a blast today. He had a good time today. We'll put it that way. And we'll have a good time next week, I'm sure, in Baltimore as well. And so I hope they lose in Baltimore, but nevertheless,
rooting for the Ravens from here on out. I like Lamar Jackson. I think that's he's a really good player, and I think it might be his time for a ring here.
Right. And Lamar's nasty. He's a very good player. He deserves more recognition than what he gets. I mean, he's going to win his second MVP, which he gets a decent amount of recognition. But I still think around the league, if fans around the league don't really appreciate how good he really is, and it is weird because he throws like 152 yards passing, but he also has 100 yards rushing. They said he was the first player ever to have 100 yards passing, 100 yards rushing, 2 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns in the same game, which is insane.
Forget the numbers. You look at the impact he has on the offense, the way the other players get set up for success when Lamar is out there. It's super impressive. I mean, guys have wide open rushing lanes because of the impact he draws, and he's such a good passer. I think it's also impressive that he's going to win MVP here 4 years apart with 2 different offensive coordinators, 2 very different styles of offense, leading his team to the number 1 seed both years in very different ways. He's not in like the Brady conversation, but the only guy I can think of who's like that is like you look at 07 Brady and 2010 Brady, I think is something on 2011, 2012 Brady. The way those eras were very different. I think that's what I think of in terms of being able to win in multiple ways that close together in that dominant of a fashion. So impressive stuff.
Right. I agree. Nagan's currently trying to make an argument.
Like I said, I'm not engaging with any Brady Mahomes arguments until Mahomes passes Montana. So I'm just gonna.
Did you know that Brady played with really good players, and that's why he won?
I'm not engaging, Pat. I'm backing away from this one.
Did you know? Isn't that so weird? You know what I mean? He had good players. Yeah. It's funny. It's funny how that works. Mahomes has crappy players on his team. I don't know if you knew that or not, but Mahomes' players are terrible.
You know who else has crappy players on their team right now is the New England Patriots.
That is correct. All right. So let's go now. All right. Before we get into the coaching search, I had a thought. Okay. I had a thought. It's an interesting thought for me, but I had a thought.
Oh boy.
Okay. I know I do smoke coming out of my ears and stuff. So
I can hear
the Chargers are currently sitting at 5. Okay. They could go a million different ways. They're obviously not drafting a quarterback, but they could go a bunch of different ways on offense. But they need a true number 1 wide receiver. They absolutely 100% failed last year, right? They failed last year. Tried to draft Quentin Johnson. He's terrible. Okay. Keenan Allen's their best wide receiver, but he's like 97 years old. So like at some point that's going to go away. Would they trade up to 3 and draft Marvin Harrison Jr.? Sitting at 4 is Arizona. Arizona, if Marvin Harrison Jr. is there, Arizona's going to take him. I've even suggested maybe trading back with Arizona instead of that. But regardless, let's just play it out. How much would LA give, right? How much would LA give to move up? And so if you just look, it's an imperfect science, right? It's an imperfect science. But if you look at the Rich Hill draft chart, which of course we're going to do since Rich
shout out Rich,
part of the Pats Nation Network. Okay. But if you just look at the chart, right? 3 is 514, 5 is 468. So that's what, like a 35-point difference, right? Which is an early 4th round pick.
Yeah.
Now I would say you probably could convince them to do a 3rd. And the reason why you could convince them to do a 3rd is because you'd say to them, hey, look, Arizona's on the phone too. They're offering us a 4th as well. Why don't I just move back to 4? Sure, I'll lose Marvin Harrison Jr., but Arizona's not going to move out of 4. Right? If I move back to 5, there's a chance that you draft Marvin Harrison Jr., and then Arizona says, well, screw this. I'm moving out. And so they trade back to 9 or whatever, 8, 9, 10, 11, who cares? And the guy jumps up and drafts Jaden Daniels, whoever it is, at 4, and we miss out on our quarterback, right? And so it's like, hey, you got to make it worth our while to move back to 5 and not go to 4. So I just think that's an interesting thing for me, that I feel like if you look at that and say, that's a way you could move back and kind of see what's going on, if that makes sense.
I like the idea, but I just don't think it'll happen because I think Odunze and Neighbors are also very highly regarded. For as good as Marvin Harrison Jr. is, you have like your Julio Jones, Calvin Johnson level prospect in this draft, but then behind him you have like your Jamar Chase level prospect, who is also fantastic in Neighbors, and Odunze is fantastic, and you also have Brock Bowers in there. Yeah. So I think the fact that the Chargers are there and are guaranteed one of those 4.
Yeah, that they're okay sticking at 5. Yeah, you might be right.
I don't think they move up unless there is somebody in there that they feel like they absolutely cannot miss out on, which I think would be Marvin Harrison Jr. And maybe they feel that way, but I don't think teams are going to. I just don't think they're going to see there's that big of a difference to give up something to come up.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I think if the Patriots end up trading back from 3, it's going to be because somebody likes Jaden Daniels or anybody. It's crazy talk to say JJ McCarthy at 3, but it was crazy talk to say Trey Lance at 3 when we were having this conversation 3 years ago. And if we talked about Jim Harbaugh to Atlanta and the Falcons wanting to go get their quarterback.
Yeah, see, I don't know.
I don't think it's
the Trey Lance stuff. The Trey Lance stuff, I think, is a little bit blown out of proportion, only because before the 2020 season, he was a top 5 pick before the season started.
Yeah, people liked him a lot. Yeah.
And so then he didn't really play in 2020. And so no one really saw anything. And they said, wow, ceiling so high that, we'll still draft him in the top 5.
I don't think it's 1-to-1, but more so that somebody falls in love with a quarterback and moves up to go get him. It's possible. I'd probably be Jaden Daniels, though, at 3. I think the only way the Patriots end up trading back is if somebody wants to come up for a quarterback, because I think that's the only way they're going to make it worth it for the Patriots.
True.
Because, if you're sitting there at 3 and you got Marvin Harrison Jr. there sitting in your lap as a guy who immediately fixes your wide receiver issue, I think if you're in New England, you got to be really tempted to come off of that. And you'll listen. You definitely listen in that spot. But I think you're only doing it if somebody's given up QB trade level picks and ammunition.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. So we'll see. But I and there's a long way to go. And we'll get into the draft at some point. And I'm going to have my mock draft coming out, not this upcoming Monday, but the Monday after that. I still have to decide what I'm going to do because I'm going to be moving around a little bit, I think, at the beginning. We'll see what happens. If Chicago hires Cliff as the OC, which it seems like it's heading that way, if they hire him as the OC, I don't see how they possibly don't take Caley Williams at number 1. Like you'd hire his college offensive coordinator and then don't take him. That'd be crazy.
Yeah, that's when I still look at the way the Bears have been acting, and it was Greg Roman and Cliff Kingsbury who they brought in for interviews. That feels like more of a sell me on what you do with this quarterback for Fields and then for Caleb Williams type of thing to help figure out the way they might get used on the field and the way they should do it going forward. And the Bears have every reason to make this as confusing as possible on the outside because they are presumably going to trade one of the assets. They're either trading number 1 or they're trading Fields. And if that's what's going to happen, you want it to be confusing on the outside so that teams feel like they have to give up a little bit more to get what they want. I still think I think Caleb Williams does go number 1, and I think it's going to be obvious by the end, but I think the Bears are going to try to cover it up for as long as possible.
Yeah, which makes sense. And so we'll see. All right, so the Patriots brought in are bringing in a pair of offensive coordinators to interview. They both are on the Rams staff, which I think makes a lot of sense. I think Gerard Mayo, what I like about what Gerard Mayo is doing is that he's bringing in young coaches, young coaches. Nick Caley, who was a coach for the Patriots for quite a while, and now is a coach for the Rams. And then Zach Robinson, who was always a coach for the Rams, but was, like Gerard Mayo, drafted by the New England Patriots. And so my pick here is Zach Robinson, and my goal, what I think our goal should be, and I don't know who the other guy is. I don't know who the third guy is because I'm not sure if there even is anyone. But I want a full Patriots drafted coaching staff. I just want all the guys to be draft picks of the Patriots because Mayo's already draft pick of the Patriots. Zach Robinson was a draft pick of the Patriots. If you can find a defensive guy out there that is some sort of coach somewhere, is a D-backs coach or whatever for some team. I know there's some players that have played for the Patriots, but not drafted by the Patriots. And so, can we find a guy that was drafted by the Patriots that the old man mom says Hightower? Let's do it. Bring in Dante Hightower and have him be the DC.
Jamie Collins linebacker.
Jamie Collins, right? But nevertheless, and that's not going to happen defensive coordinator wise. But I do think Zach Robinson is the easier choice. He's been in LA. He's a Sean McVay guy. Caley's there, and he has familiarity with the Patriots, but he's not a McVay guy.
Well, I look at this, and my first question is why are we saying this as an or conversation? You remember last year they brought in a whole bunch of guys to interview for offensive coordinator, and then one of them ends up on the staff in Adrian Clem.
Right.
And I feel like that's how they should approach this. Right now, Zach Robinson is the pass game coordinator or QB coach for the Rams. Nick Caley is the tight ends coach.
Yep.
You can bring them both in with promotions, guys who know how to work together, and continue that relationship in New England. That I don't think this is an either or thing. I think you can do both and make Zach Robinson your offensive coordinator and make Nick Caley tight ends coach and assistant offensive coordinator, or however you want to do it, and give him a boosted title and let them do that. I think I prefer Zach Robinson more just because I think he has so much familiarity with that offense and how it works. And I like the idea of going in that direction, especially when we're so unproven at the quarterback position. And you look at the McVay style of offense and how they've elevated quarterbacks who haven't been that good. I like that. And then Nick Caley, I mean, he was hit or miss in New England. He's been in New England since 2015, was the tight ends coach since 2017. We've talked on here previously about how bad the tight ends have been in that span. Devin Asiasi and Dalton Keene not turning into anything even remotely useful. The disappointment that was Jonnu Smith. Maybe Nick Caley wasn't the reason for any of that, but I do think when he was here, we were disappointed with a lot of the tight end product that we saw on the field. And that also includes 2019 after Gronk, when they're trying to figure out an offense. Ryan Izzo wasn't anything to write home about. And so that was an issue, but I do think he's well liked by the people around him. And I suspect some of that was also a personnel issue. You only work with the guys you got. And if you can't develop them because they're not good, then that's all there is to it. Right. So I think the Zach Robinson, Nick Caley combo is my favorite of all the options they have right now. My only concern with it is that if you do that, you're probably going to have an outside zone offensive line. So you got to bring in a new offensive line coach for it, one who's very familiar with that style.
Yeah.
And, that might mean Mike Onwenu's gone. I don't know if that's a scheme fit for him. And it probably does, if you're going to switch to that style of offense, going and giving him all that money, if he's not going to be a fit and paying him for 4 years or whatever, I'm not sure if that makes sense. And I don't know if you're going to get a better player, but sinking in a lot of money to a guy who you're just doing it to do it also doesn't make sense. So curious to see where they go with it for sure. And they're going to have more interviews here too. They have to. So I'm very curious to see what those look like as well, because this isn't the only school of thought out there for offense.
Well, and that's really what it comes down to, right? And I think I would love to see Onwenu back, but you're right. Like, the scheme fit is such a big part of, especially if you're going to drop a ton of money on a guy, scheme fit is massive. And so he does have pretty good movement skills, I think, but that's not his game, right? He's not a movement guy necessarily. And so, maybe he doesn't quite fit the system they want to run in, and maybe he does. I don't know. I guess we'll kind of see where that goes. The hard thing is that Trent Brown doesn't fit that system either, if that's the case. No. And so he's gone too, which I think he should be gone anyways. So he's gone too. So now you're looking at it saying, okay, we have both tackle spots. That's really difficult.
Yep.
And
then you're looking at what the Packers did. The Packers have similar style offense there, and both of their tackles this year were day 3 picks who they drafted and developed over time.
True.
And you're going to have a lot of that, and unless you're drafting tackle in the first round, you're probably going to be worse at the position next year, but you're kind of doing it for the sake of getting better for the future. One step backward to take 2 steps forward. And you also look at, guys who are available in free agency. You're not going to find a super high quality tackle there, and you're going to be a little bit rough at the spot, but I think you're hoping that with the right coaching, you make it work. So I don't know. And you're probably, it's a deep tackle draft, so you can pick somebody in the 2nd or 3rd round this year and get somebody baseline competent. I think you have better odds this year than you would have in some of the years past, but it's still, a risky proposition, especially if you're dropping in a rookie quarterback.
Well, that's the thing. So Nick Knapp is asking an interesting question. One of my buddies is in the chat. And he's asking, is it a multi-year rebuild? Are they trying to bring in, try to bring in everyone you can to win? Of course you want to bring in as much as you can, but how many spots on offense need to be filled or replaced, right? And you feel like, and then, Mr. Bill W says all of them. And it kind of feels that way. It kind of feels like you need to fill almost all the spots, right? And like, you talk about if you let go of Onwenu, and assuming you don't bring Trent Brown, which please God, don't bring Trent Brown back, you need a left tackle and a right tackle. You might need a center. Now, maybe maybe Cole Strange flips the center. Maybe Jake Andrews can play center. I don't know, but you need to know whether you have a center or not. So there's 2, maybe 3 spots. You need at least 2 good wide receivers, right? So there's 2 wide receivers right there. So there's 2 more spots. You need a quarterback, right? You need a third down back. You need a tight end. So, I mean, other than that, they're doing great. Like they have no offense.
When you look 2 years down the line, let's say, we'll look at the 2025 offense where you want to be at that point. I think we expect David Andrews is gone at that point. You are probably going to have 2 new tackles between now and then. Cole Strange is still very much a mystery. City So looked good at points, but pass protection was rough for him. He's a really good run blocker, but that's also in a mostly gap power inside zone system. He might not be a fit for the new thing. Receiver, everybody but Pop Douglas and possibly Kendrick Bourne, but he's a free agent. Tight end, you don't have any on the roster for next year. Quarterback, you need a new one. Ramondre Stevenson's contract is up after next season. They don't have any fullbacks. I mean, there's a real chance that when the 2025 season starts, you're going to have 8 or 9 plus new starters on offense from your last game of the 2023 season. And that's also not a bad thing. This offense wasn't good. There isn't a lot to hold on to.
Right.
They should be turning this thing over because not a lot of reason to keep a lot of these guys. So we're looking at a 2 or 3 year rebuild. I think you're just kind of hoping that somewhere along the line you hit something that speeds up the process, or you hit on something that gets you to good, and it's not the long-term solution, but you get to good and then you can build from there instead of going all the way back down to 0, kind of like they did this year in rebuild.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is that you look at it's an interesting spot because you ask yourself, we could be the Texans or we could be the Panthers. Like you don't know. If you draft a quarterback in the first round, you're not sure where you're going to be, right? You don't know if all of a sudden that quarterback's going to be like, holy crap, that guy's unbelievable, right? And I think CJ Stroud is playing better. Had a better year this year than he did ever in college. He looked better at quarterback than he did at Ohio State. And so that's not something that you typically see. Yeah. And so that is interesting to me. Okay, how are you going to look on the field, right? How are you going to play? I think the Texans had a better roster than the Patriots do right now.
Yes.
But, that's the hard thing for me is that I wonder what happens, right? I wonder what happens. Do you look at it and you say, all right, fine, we were competitive there. We're building something. Great. And they are. And Houston wasn't, like we said, Houston wasn't really competing for a championship. But the fact that they were able to be that good right away and win the division right away is impressive. And you see where Stroud is going, and now you can kind of build some pieces to get there. And you're going to have guys, because guys want to play with great quarterbacks, because great quarterbacks win championships. That's what happens. Yeah. And so when you have a great quarterback, guys want to play there. So if you look at CJ Stroud as an elite quarterback, you're going to get guys, obviously on the offensive side, but even on the defensive side, that want to play with him because they feel like he gives them a chance to win.
And right? And beyond that, I mean, you have a wide receiver 1, a quarterback 1, and a pass rusher 1. Pro Bowl level guys at all 3 spots right now, all on rookie deals, which gives you so much more money to throw around and get people to come play with you. And I think it's the Patriots are not going to be like the Texans because the Texans had a franchise left tackle and a budding Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver on their roster,
which nobody knew.
Well, we knew about Laramie Tunsil. We didn't know Nico Collins was going to turn into this guy, like a Brandon Ayuk type guy out there, but he has, and he's really good. And unless Pop Douglas turns into that guy next year, and Vidarian Lowe turns into a franchise left tackle overnight. That's not what the Patriots are going to be. And I think, I don't know, my opinion is still, I want to get a quarterback, but I also don't think you can force that pick. If you don't love a guy at 3, do not take a quarterback just for the sake of taking a quarterback. That's not how it works. And then I also look at the coordinators they're bringing in. You look at that Rams McVay style of offense, I don't think that's a Jaden Daniels offense. That's a Drake May offense. That is a Bo Nix maybe offense, maybe a JJ McCarthy offense. But Caleb Williams is a guy who plays in a lot more of a spread. Jaden Daniels plays in a lot more of a spread. Michael Penix is a guy who his one big weakness as a quarterback is that he can't attack the middle of the field. That's where he struggles. That's the heart of the McVay offense, is finding ways to attack the middle of the field. So if that's where you are and May isn't on the board, don't take a quarterback at 3. If this is the direction you want to go with your offense, unless they have some, unless they're looking at what's going on in Baltimore and trying to integrate what we've seen in Baltimore the last 5 years with the McVay offense, and they want to go for that, and you want to take Jaden Daniels, then, I can get on board with that as a concept. But if they're trying to run what they've run in Los Angeles, then I don't think there's going to be a quarterback available at 3 who's worth that pick who fits that.
Oh, you knew it was coming. You knew the McCarthy reference was coming. Look, that's the question, right? That's the question. And I think as we kind of go along here, you look at it and say, all right, do you want the third best quarterback at 3? Or do you think someone's going to make a mistake, right? Do you look at this and think they're going to screw it up? The Bears are going to take the wrong guy at 1, or, Washington's going to take the wrong guy at 2, and the guy that we really have as our number 1 guy on the board is available at 3, right? And maybe and if that's the case, then you take him, right? But if
run to the podium.
Right,
Caleb Williams is there at 3, then you run to the podium and you figure the rest out later.
And so that's the thing, right? But if you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, we're at 3, Jaden Daniels is available. Caleb and Drake may have gone 1, 2. We like Jaden Daniels, but we don't love Jaden Daniels. Why don't we move back? Maybe we take Marvin Harrison Jr. Maybe we move back to 6 or 7. And maybe there's a team that's in love with Jaden Daniels, and they want to get up there and to take him. So, okay, you move back. Say it's Atlanta. I don't know. I don't think it will be, but say it's Atlanta. You move back to 8. Atlanta jumps up to 3. They take Jaden Daniels. You're at 8. You draft Joe Alt or Fashanu from Penn State or
Brock
Malik
Bowers.
Neighbors or Brock Bowers or one of those guys. Yeah. You're going to get a first-round pick for next year as well for a team that has a rookie quarterback. You never know how that's going to go. And so to me, that's starting to look a little bit more enticing. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but that looks a little bit more enticing. Now, do you draft a guy like Bo Nix in the 2nd round? Do you draft a guy like Joe Milton, who people have mentioned in the chat a little bit?
Oh, I'm out on Joe Milton. I'm very out on Joe Milton.
And that's okay. But I'm just saying, do you take a shot in the 4th or 5th round at Joe Milton, which is where he's going to go, right?
The pro with Joe Milton is that he could hit the top of the lighthouse at Gillette Stadium. The con is that he was aiming for the guy in the corner of the end zone. Yeah. That's what you get with him. Oh, that's
and that's the thing. And he's a little bit older, and I understand that. But again, if you think, wow, if you don't take a quarterback and you're looking for someone with some like crazy upside potential, and you take him in the 5th round or whatever, like what's the harm?
Once you get to day,
who knows? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Although here's the thing, we say what's the harm now, which is going to be great and all until we get to the middle of the season next year, and they took a quarterback in the 5th round, and the next breakout receiver went 10 picks later, and there's going to be
but you can't control that. I mean, what are you going to do? And the Patriots are going to have drafted at least 1 wide receiver before then. So it's just like
no, I'm just people will. Once you get to day 3, it's.
I mean, Tony Maz. Did you see Tony Maz's tweet this morning what the hell are we talking about?
That's what I'm referencing there.
Would you?
Yeah, no, I'm not. Like there's a lot of things to criticize the Patriots for drafting in the last decade, but taking a kicker when they needed a kicker, even if they missed on the pick, they needed a kicker. That was you had to do that, and they took a guy they liked. Sometimes it doesn't work out. That's the nature of this whole thing.
Correct.
But
correct.
Yeah, and the more I think about it's It's also, I think you don't overthink this. I think if you're at pick 3 and there's no good trade offers or anything, I think you just take the guy who might be the best prospect in the draft in Marvin Harrison Jr. and fix the wide receiver issue we've been complaining about since 2017. And you figure out the rest. That helps your offense in a ton of ways. And Marvin Harrison Jr., Kendrick Bourne, and Pop Douglas is a nice start to get things going. And I think no matter where this goes, you're going to sign tackles and you're going to sign a quarterback and you're going to sign receivers so that when you get into the draft, you have flexibility. Like if you go into the draft and you need to draft a quarterback, what are we doing? You're setting yourself up for failure that way. Sign somebody who can start games for you if you need them to start games for you, whether that's Brissett or Baker Mayfield or Gardner Minshew, or insert your preferred backup quarterback of choice here.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, it's one of those other situations too, that if you decide to draft a quarterback, now you have a guy that can mentor him behind him, right? And so, which is nice, you know what I mean? And so, especially a guy like Brissett, like I love Brissett because he's such a great guy in the locker room. Like I like that, So of course you got to have the guy in front of him, and he's not a great quarterback by any stretch, but it's one of those things. So,
and we're trying to get to good first. Like,
correct.
You gotta walk before you can run here with this.
Correct.
Offense.
And to your point, right? You talk about, and this Mike Evans got mentioned in the chat a few times. T. Higgins is going to be, a free agent. Michael Pittman's going to be a free agent, right?
Hollywood Brown.
Hollywood Brown, right, is going to be a free agent. Brandon Ayuk isn't a free agent, but he is on the last year of his deal. So you look at some of these players and you're like, man, there's some really, really good wide receivers available. Now, there's a very good chance that the majority of them re-sign, right? I think the Colts would be incredibly stupid to let Michael Pittman walk. Would be just beyond dumb to let him walk. You have a second-year quarterback who looked electric at the beginning of the year last year. Pittman's clearly your number one wide receiver. You have to surround your quarterback with talent. You got to bring that guy back, right? T. Higgins, I don't know if he's going to be able to come back or not. They might not be able to squeeze him under the cap. They might not.
I think they sign him and let Tyler Boyd go,
which makes sense.
Another slightly interesting guy. The name I also think about is Calvin Ridley. Because if the Jaguars re-sign him, then they have to give up a second-round pick instead of a third as part of that trade. That was in all of the super complicated terms of that trade.
Yes. Yep.
I do wonder if they say, hey, we don't want to pay whatever his price is going to be and give up the extra pick. We're going to go in the draft and try to get someone.
That's a good point.
Especially because they might have Brian Thomas Jr. or a Keon Coleman or whoever available where they are, who they might just say, we're going to roll with this.
Yeah.
He's a guy who I think would be interesting in New England. He's a little bit older than you would expect, but not as much wear on the tires. He was just an older guy coming out of college, and he's got the year suspension in there.
True. Yeah. True.
But if this offense, if it's Pop Douglas, Calvin Ridley, and Marvin Harrison Jr. next year, you can throw in any backup quarterback, and your offense is going to look, serviceable at points. It still won't be a good offense, but it will be less boring than it was this past season, and that's an improvement.
Right. And that's really what it comes down to, right? And then you kind of figure out what's going on, right? You look at it and say, all right, well, what do we have? What can we build around? You've signed these guys. You've signed a backup quarterback. You've signed, a number one-ish wide receiver, right? And you feel like, okay, we got Pop Douglas. Probably have KB coming back. It seems like Kendrick Bourne wants to come back and is going to come back.
It seems like either New England or wherever Belichick goes, as long as the offer is competitive.
Yeah. So I'd love to see him back here, and so we'll see what happens. But I'd love to see him back here, and I hope the Patriots want that as well. So, if you're talking about, I think that's pretty solid, right? When you talk about, bringing in one of those guys, whether it be Evans or Pittman or whomever else, right? And then you have Douglas, and then you have Bourne, and then, somewhere down the line, you have either Parker or Juju, whomever ends up staying out of there. I think one of those guys, I would say, I think Parker's money is too big. It doesn't matter. Either way, now you're in a position where you don't have to draft Marvin Harrison number 3. You could, but you don't have to because you have a serviceable enough offense. You have a legitimately good quarterback, wide receiver, right? You could take Jaden Daniels. But you don't have to because you've brought in a veteran quarterback, right? You could take an offensive lineman, but maybe, you've signed a tackle and you don't feel it, so you want to set yourself up in free agency that you're not looking at it saying, this is the one thing that we have to take.
Yeah.
Because number one, you have no leverage when you're trying to make a trade, right? That's number one. And then number two, you yourself have no leverage. If you're looking at it saying, we have no choice but to draft a quarterback, well, now we have to do whatever it takes to draft a quarterback. And that doesn't seem – so it's like if someone comes to you and says, this happened to the Bengals, and this is my favorite trade, my favorite draft day trade ever never happened when the New Orleans Saints called the Cincinnati Bengals and offered them basically every pick that they ever owned to move up to 3.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bengals said no because they needed a quarterback, and they drafted Caley Smith, who is arguably the worst quarterback to ever play professional football. His numbers, if you get a chance one day, go to profootballreference.com, look up Caley Smith. It's incredible. And the Saints were like, we'll give you literally everything. This is the draft that they traded. I don't even know who they traded up with, but they drafted Rick Williams, and they literally traded their entire draft to move up and draft.
Oh yeah, that was a crazy trade.
And but they offered like their pick, their first round pick for the next like 2 years after that, and like 3 or 4 second round picks and a third round. It was outrageous how much they offered. And they were like, no, we have to draft a quarterback. And so it's like, well, if you set yourself up in that situation, you then can't take that outrageous offer. Like, it doesn't matter who's on the board at 3. If you're at 1, okay, maybe you think it's a generational one. If you're at 3, there's no reason you shouldn't take that deal if you're moving back to 10. You know what I mean? And so,
yeah.
Anyways, that's the way I look at it.
Well, you don't have to. You can go back in New England history, recent history here. The Cole Strange pick. The Patriots went into that draft with no plan at guard and drafted one in the first round as a result. There's a lot of everything around that pick, but part of the issue was they needed a guard. That was a desperation pick. Right. And if you go into the draft needing a position, you're doing it wrong. You need to have bodies at every spot that you can put on the field. And it doesn't have to be a good team, but it needs to be a team that you feel like, won't go 0-17 on you. It needs to be a team that can win games. And you can do that in free agency. So yeah, curious to see. I did see, speaking of free agency, somebody way back in the chat had asked about Chris Jones in free agency. If the Chiefs let him go, I would not be surprised if he hits free agency. And we talked about all the receivers the Patriots could sign. There's a real chance none of them hit the market. There's a real chance all of them end up back with their teams. And if that's the case, Patriots are in a tough position where they have a lot of money to spend and no real way to address their needs with it. You might not be able to pay tackle. There's not going to be tackles worth that money. There's not going to be receivers worth that money. But there could be 3 or 4 defensive tackles here who are Pro Bowl level defensive tackles available in free agency. And if you got all that money to spend, add good players, or like Christian Wilkins is a name that comes to mind, or Justin Matabuke from Baltimore. And if you have a chance to go from great to elite at defensive tackle in a way that really helps you schematically, that frees up your edge rushers to do a ton more, frees up guys on the back end, allows you to be a lot more versatile with the pressures that you bring, allows you to be a lot better stuffing the run. You can stuff the run and rush the passer out of a lot of the same looks. And we're in the business of making the team better. I don't think this should be like 2021 where they threw crazy money at unproven guys at key spots. Don't overspend. I know we all want to see this team get better. It doesn't help you if you're going to go out and give Tyler Boyd a massive contract. He's a good receiver, but he doesn't elevate you a ton. And if you go give him a ton of money in 2 years, 3 years, you're probably going to regret that. Don't do something like that. Sign guys who are worth the money. I'd rather leave money unspent and saved for future extensions or future free agencies than spend the money just to spend the money.
Right. True. That's true. By the way, someone mentioned Godshaw. He does have 1 year left on his deal, but it's like the out is like $3 million. It's easy. It's easily cuttable if you wanted to move on from him.
Well, that's the other thing. You can move on from Guy and Godshaw here, free up money, and use that to go sign a different defensive tackle who is younger. And they're both good players, but I think that second defensive tackle spot is a spot you can improve in your front seven.
Right. By the way, I mentioned Caley Smith, and a few people mentioned other things in the chat, but But the Achilles Smith thing, 22 games, 17 starts. 17 starts in his career. 3-14 record, 46% completion percentage, 2,212 yards, 5 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Just absolutely abysmal.
The only guy who can think of the worst than that is like Josh Rosen.
Yeah, right. But Josh Rosen didn't start enough games for it to matter. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing for me, is that this guy actually started. He started 11. He played in 12 games and started 11 games in his second year. So, like, he played like a full, and then he started 4 games his rookie year. So, anyways, nevertheless.
Yeah.
So,
And can I address another comment in the chat too, by the way, about that? Because we've got a number of questions in here about Cortland Sutton as a New England possibility, and they can move off of his contract. I think he has 1 year. Let me see. I think he has 1 year left after this. It's either 1 or 2. He has 2 seasons left, and the Patriots would pay like $13 million each of the next 2 seasons, probably, which is, I mean, that's fine value for him. I'm not opposed to that. I like that idea. It's just going to depend on what you have to give up to make that happen. I'm probably not giving up more than a day 3 pick for that. Just when you consider his injury history, the fact that he'll be 30 by the end of that.
Right.
He's better than Devontae Parker for sure, but he's kind of, at best a wide receiver 2. I think he's kind of the midpoint between T. Higgins and Devontae Parker, especially when you consider the injuries. You can count on him probably missing time every single season. And if you have to give up draft capital as part of that, that's tough. And also unrelated, but Mike Larry just asked it. Who is the Ravens defensive coordinator? That's Mike McDonald. He was a defensive coach for the Ravens for a while, went to Michigan to be their defensive coordinator for, I believe, 2 seasons, and then came back to be the defensive coordinator of the Ravens. So, he is fantastic. And that defensive style is very similar to things that we have seen in New England in the past. That's how New England's defense has looked when it's good before.
Yeah, that's a good point. By the way, Nick Knapp's mentioned Ryan Leaf, who probably is the greatest draft bust of all time.
Yeah,
that quarterback, right? And you could make the argument about Jamarcus Russell, obviously, too. But Ryan Leaf is
blank DVD Jamarcus Russell.
Yes, great story with Ryan Leaf. And in his personal life and what he's overcome, but terrible quarterback, and he freely admits that. But nevertheless, I look. There's a million different ways that the Patriots could go, and I think this is one of my favorite parts, honestly, of this, when the chats fly in and people are asking a million questions and we're kind of bouncing things off, and then they're throwing out ideas, and I enjoy doing that, and that's one of the reasons why I love people being in the chat, and we got 200 and something people, 240 people watching right now, which is great, and people are in the chat asking questions and throwing out ideas, and I love that, right? And so, but it's like I just feel like we end up kind of circling those same different ideas right now. Nothing's clear right now. We don't know what type of offense they're going to run, right? Michael Falco is very upset about that they don't know what type of offense they're going to run yet on January 20th. But
we got time. Patience.
We don't know exactly what offense we're going to run yet. We don't know exactly what kind of defense we want to run yet. We don't know what the personnel looks like just yet, right? There's a lot of options, but the other part of it is that we don't know what's going to be available for them. Are there guys that become available?
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole what the trade market looks like.
Right. Does Stephon Diggs want to Buffalo? Now, is Buffalo going to trade in New England? Probably not, but you never know. If New England can put together the best offer for him, maybe they will. Now, it kind of seems like he wouldn't want to go from Buffalo with Josh Allen to New England with whomever the hell their quarterback's going to be next year, but you never know.
Yeah. And I think he's under contract for a bit here. I think he ends up staying.
I think so too. But there's rumblings about him not being happy, whatever. But I don't see a reason why they would want to trade him unless he's being that much of a pain in the ass.
Yeah. And I think if you're New England here, as much as it hurts, because we were in the playoffs 2 years ago, thinking we're rebuilding this thing, and it's going to be 2 years off, a year off, and we're going to be right back where we were, and we're back to the bottom of the NFL. I think the key is to have some degree of patience with this. I think you need to build this in a sustainable way. And I'm not saying don't take risks. I'm not saying don't take a quarterback. I'm saying don't force it. This team is not close enough to go all in. Look at trades. It's not worth. You're not making a big crazy trade this offseason. I'd love Brandon Ayuk to come to New England. If it's 2 firsts for Brandon Ayuk, something crazy like that, or even a first, I'm not giving up next year's first for Brandon Ayuk because odds are that's going to be a top 12 pick in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I love Brandon Ayuk. I would love him in New England. That's not sustainable for New England going forward. I think you want to have a little bit of homegrownness to this, sign some role players, let the coaches establish a system. And the goal is that by probably year 3 of whatever this administration is, you are a playoff team. I think the goal is to look functionally better next season. You don't have to win more games, but you want to look functionally better. You want more cohesion. Year 2, I think you want to surprise people. I think you want to take a step forward that people didn't see coming. That's going to come from player development internally, and a 4th round pick that was taken being better than people thought, or a 6th round pick being better than people thought. And then the idea is then by year 3, that's when your quarterback will have a year or 2 of experience under their belt, and you have a whole scheme built up. You've added talent, and after that second year off season, that's when you can start to go all in and make some of the big moves. It's just, we're back at the beginning of this life cycle. Unless they get somewhere very lucky along the way and accelerate it, it's going to take time. Unfortunately, I wish that wasn't the case, and I hope
and that's the thing. And honestly, right now, with the amount of holes that you have on your team, it's not the worst thing in the world. No. You need good players. What's the point of winning 8 games next year? If you sign Jacoby Brissett to come in and be a stopgap for you for a year, and he leads the Patriots to an 8-9 record, like, that's great. You can brag about it on Twitter to your friends and stuff, and you can, oh, hey, look, we won 8 games, but like, ultimately, what does that do for you? Right?
Yeah.
That doesn't help you because you have so many holes and you need elite players. Winning 8 games doesn't help you because you're drafting 15th again, and now you didn't draft a quarterback this year. You need a quarterback next year. You're not going to get one, right? And so that's one of those things that makes it difficult.
Well, I think the other half of that thing too is that you want to see the team itself play better. Like you want the team to play better, but not necessarily to translate into wins, because at a point in here you do need to draft a quarterback. If it isn't this year, you're going to need to do it the year after. You're going to trade for somebody, or you're going to try to sign somebody if they hit free agency. That's going to be the play. And when that opportunity comes around, you would like the team to be good enough that you can be competitive in, if it's a trade talk or free agency talk, or if it's a draft, that you feel like you can put a quarterback into this system and things are going to work. That's why I meant to tweet out some clips and I didn't get around to editing them. The guy I came around to way more than I was expecting to, and I got into the tape, was Bo Nix. I don't think he's special. I don't think he's a franchise guy, but I do think in the right system, he's a guy who could start year 1 and be like, we talked about Sam Howell. I think he could be a little bit better version of what Sam Howell was at points. And he's a guy you're probably going to get in the 2nd round. Although I think I sent it to you after our last show. The name of the reporter is escaping me right now. I'll have to go back and find it. But one of the guys was Benjamin Albright was talking about what the buzz he's been hearing about quarterbacks, and he's hearing Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy as early 2nd, late 1st round guys. He's also hearing Michael Penix as a definite day 2, possibly round 3 type of quarterback, which I like a lot of what Michael Penix does, but he has a lot of holes in his game for a guy who's played that long, and he has a lot of medical concerns. And I don't think teams are going to like him until that point. I think if you're New England, you can probably feel safe.
Yeah.
If you like Michael Penix and you're New England, I feel like you can probably feel confident either taking him in the 3rd with your pick or trading up from where you are in the 3rd round and getting him somewhere in the mid to late 2nd. But if you're gonna go into this McVay style offense, I think Bo Nix can run that, because you're not asking for a ton of high difficulty throws, and that's all right. We can get somebody at the quarterback position for now. We're gonna go from an F grade to a C- at the position, and then we're going to build a team, and we're going to see maybe he gets better. And if he doesn't, in 2 years, we're going to take another stab at the position.
Yeah. And that's what you're trying to do. Ultimately, you're trying to get to a situation where you can build around an elite quarterback. You need a quarterback to win. You have to get one, right? And so you have to draft that quarterback. Now, whether that quarterback comes in the 1st round, like Josh Allen, like Lamar Jackson, like
Mahomes,
Patrick Mahomes, like this guy and that guy, or whether he comes in the 3rd round like Dak Prescott, or the 7th round like Brock Purdy, or so like those are the situations where it's like it doesn't matter with a 6th round like Tom Brady. It doesn't matter where the guy comes from. It matters once he's here. How do you build around him? How do you support him? How do you build the team up? How do you build him up? Those are the questions that you need to answer, and that's what the Patriots have not done a good enough job doing. They didn't do a good enough job of it with Mac Jones. They didn't do a good enough job with Bailey Zappi. Now, there's a possibility that Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi were always going to be not good, and it was never going to work. But you didn't get the best out of Mac Jones this year, definitively. You put him in a bad spot. You put him in a bad spot last year. You put him in a bad spot again this year. He didn't rise to the occasion. He didn't make himself better. But you didn't help him out that much, right? And that's the issue for me, is that you have to put the guy in a good situation to see what he has. We don't know what Mac Jones is right now. Mac Jones isn't good. I think we can pretty definitively say Mac Jones isn't a starting level quarterback.
Or the version that exists right now, no.
That's the thing. But what we saw in 2021, it was a little limited, but like you're like, okay, he could do something, right? And so it's one of those issues for me that I think I look at it and just think like, man, you never know. Like he could have been okay.
Yeah.
But then again, as Austin Gale says, the worst thing in the NFL is a good quarterback, because then you're just stuck in the middle, right?
Yeah,
and so,
and I think I'm going to go back here. David, I think David put this perfectly. He says, bottom line is Pats need to hit on players in at least the first 3 rounds. I think that's the case here. I think regardless of position, the first 3 rounds, your first 2 days of the draft, you want 3 starter level players on offense. You need that. Whether that's you're finding a tackle, whether you're finding a guard in there, a tight end, a wide receiver, quarterback, running back, wherever it is, you need guys who are that good, because you're gonna need a lot more of them going forward, and you need your premium picks to be hits. And
not just that, but as they did last year with the defense, the first 3 picks, at least the first 3 picks should be offense, and that's the thing for me is load up on the offensive side of the ball, and like you say, throw darts at the board and see what happens, right? And I think they should draft multiple wide receivers again. I think they need to draft another running back at some point, and draft a few more offensive linemen. Yeah, I mean, look at running back. They got one really good one who's up after this year, and I think we saw weaknesses there. Like they need everything on offense. There's no position where you're not thinking about drafting a guy there. So. And I think, again, the biggest key is you can't miss on guys. You can't have a total bust in the first or second round this year. Right. If that happens, you're going to be picking right up near the top again in the near future. Right. And this is what we talked about, right after the draft, we talked about Detroit and Detroit's draft and how people killed them, absolutely killed them for drafting Gibbs at 12, Jack Campbell at 18. You draft Laporta and Brian Branch in the second round, and people just absolutely lit them up. I don't know what you're doing, why you're drafting a running back at 12, blah, 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 so on. One of the things that we said was that you're making an educated guess. You're taking a bet that these guys are going to be at least good. You're not taking this wild swing that this guy's going to be an elite player or he's going to suck. And so you get these guys that you think we look at it and say, all right, we're good. Like they're good players. They may not be superstars, but they're good, solid players. Yeah. And then Gibbs outperformed what you thought he was going to do. Branch outperformed what you thought he was going to do. Laporta outperformed what you thought he was going to do. So 3 out of those 4 guys outperformed what you thought they were going to do, and Jack Campbell probably gave you about what you expected. And all of a sudden, you're in the NFC Championship game, right? And so it's not that they didn't have a good team before that, but you get the idea here. Like that put them over the top. If you draft well and you hit on those guys, that's how you end up in this spot, Yeah, and it's you take enough picks on offense, and you're going to get really good players in there. Amon-Ra St. Brown's a day 3 guy who's turned into an NFL superstar at wide receiver and a huge part of that offense. So that's part of it here is just you got to keep taking the shots, because eventually you're going to hit, and that's. How we always talk about how, for the most part, under Bill Belichick, this team has always had good corners and always had a good secondary. Why that is? Because they drafted a corner in the second round every single season and signed like 15 of them as undrafted free agents. If you bring in enough bodies, you are going to find talented players in there just, by luck. It's one of the reasons why we think the Steelers are so good at drafting receivers.
Hey, we talk about the good receivers the Steelers draft. Go look at the draft history. They had some really, really bad picks in there too. They just draft like 2 receivers every single season, and when you do that, you find good ones.
That's
So
it.
that's the Patriots kind of have to do that. And the Patriots have drafted 3 receivers in the last 2 drafts. And they look to have gotten a starter-capable guy in Pop Douglas out of it. So the strategy works out. You just got to do it, and it's another reason why you got to think about trading back. And that's not just the first round. If you're there in the second round, and somebody says, "Hey, we'll give you a day 3 pick, a 4th round pick to move back a couple spots, or whatever it is," I don't have the value chart in front of me. Unless you got a guy you love, you jump on some of those opportunities, because having extra picks in there is how you can address some of this stuff. And they probably need a new kicker in there, and you're probably going to have to draft or sign one there too. So getting the extra picks for those guys is huge.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And you get the second overall pick in the second round. So, you look at that and think that's worth something. That's a valuable pick to have that people want to trade up to. And so we'll see kind of where it goes. But I do think that you need to take as many hits, as many shots at the dartboard as you possibly can. Yeah. You're not going to hit on all of them, but if you take enough of them, you're going to hit on some of them, right? Well, and then that's all anyone remembers.
I think the Pats have 7 picks in this year's draft. I'm pretty sure is what it is.
I think you're right.
And if you can get that to 8 or 9 and have 7 of them be offense, and the other 2 you can use on miscellaneous things like a corner or a linebacker or defensive tackle or wherever you want to go with it. I think you got to do it. Take a guy at every spot. 2 offensive linemen, a tight end, a running back, a wide receiver, and quarterback.
Also, Patriots Loco says we should have Pickens and Flowers in this roster, and I agree with you with George Pickens. He should be a Patriot. Maybe he was off their board because of off-field issues or whatever. I don't care. I freaking love the guy. I wanted him at 22. I wanted him again at 29. I wanted him at 50. I wanted them to draft him, and they didn't. And I'm pissed about it because he's a beast. He's a head case, but he's a beast. Zay Flowers, I'm sorry. You will never change my mind that Christian Gonzalez wasn't the right pick. That was 100% the correct pick. Christian Gonzalez is a great pick. That's it. Done. That's it.
Christian Gonzalez is basically the only guy I would have taken ahead of Zay Flowers at that time.
Correct.
And I suspect the Patriots felt the same way by the interest they showed too.
Yes. And so it seemed to me, we've talked about this before, and I'll just you're at 14. You know what Pittsburgh's drafting when they come up. You know that Washington's taken Forbes. Everyone said Washington's taken Forbes at 16. You know that. And so now you look at it and say, okay, 15 is the only pick we don't know. It's the Jets. Maybe they stick and they take someone. Maybe they don't. They're not taking a corner. They're probably not taking a wide receiver because they have elite guys at both of those positions. So they're probably not taking either one of those guys. They might, but they might not. But no matter what we do, if we move back to 17, we're going to get either Flowers or Gonzo. And so,
and reportedly, Keon White was in that conversation as well as the guy they liked there.
Yeah, and of course they get him later on in the draft. But so that which becomes also the situation to me. And Mike Larry says the Pats have bigger needs. Maybe, but you always need a number 1 lockdown corner.
Yeah, and I think you, when you're in the draft, generally speaking, you should just go best player available. Just because you want the most talent, and if you end up drafting the same position in the first 3 years in a row, if all guys hit, you're going to be so good at that position that you can build the rest of your team in free agency pretty easily and pretty cheaply, or you can spend extra money because you're saving it on other guys. You can be truly elite at one spot, and if you can do that and have depth and young depth there, that's also incredibly valuable. I mean, they have. You look at where the secondary is right now, and Marcus Jones is still a question mark. Jack Jones is off the roster. J.C. Jackson, we assume, will be off the roster. Jonathan Jones is good, but limited and aging, and he's had injury concerns. If they hadn't drafted Christian Gonzalez, corner would be a massive need this offseason. And, they're in position to draft the wide receiver now. I'd rather have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Christian Gonzalez than Zay Flowers and whoever. I mean, maybe Zay Flowers and Marvin Harrison Jr. together would be fun, but I'll give you that one.
It would be really fun.
Yeah. But
so anyways, all right, let's get out of here. We've been here for an hour and a half, but it's been a good conversation. But this is kind of where we're going, right? I mean, We have to figure out what's going on. Again, by the end of the week, I do think that by the time Thursday comes, we're going to get a little more clarity on the coaching situation. I think that after this week, none of the other coaches are getting fired. If you made the NFC Championship game, you're not getting fired. That's not happening. So those coaches are going to be safe. I think the other coaches, the other teams are going to make their decisions. And again, Philly, you assume are going to stick with Sirianni, but they haven't officially made that announcement yet. No one's really said anything yet. So that's still up in the air. We'll see what the Bills decide to do. I don't know. Maybe Andy Reid walks away. Like, that could be an interesting one too. Maybe there's some real talk about Andy Reid walking away. Right. And then so dominoes haven't fallen because of that. Right. And so, because they mentioned, 3 years ago? Right, because 3 years ago, Dan Campbell, right, gave his speech on this day, in Detroit. So he was already hired. No one's gotten hired to run the league yet. So it is interesting that it's running a little bit later than it usually does. And I think maybe it's because the extra week and everything else. But
and the Bill Belichick of it all seems like it's holding things up.
Sure. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the Patriots are holding interviews for all the coordinator spots right now. It seems like we're getting a full refresh, and we might not have full clarity in a week, but I would imagine in 2.5 weeks, we'll probably have a much better idea of where things are. And then you just go from there. See what the team is. I'm going to start really getting into the draft tape. I'm actually going to be looking at some defensive linemen this week out of curiosity. So I'll have some more info there by the time we get to what, Wednesday or Thursday whenever we do our show.
We'll probably do it Thursday again.
Yep.
So
because defensive, if you're in the second round, you got a chance for the defensive lineman. I'm never going to be upset with that too. You need offense, but if you can get an impact defensive lineman,
right? If you haven't already signed Chris Jones, what the heck? so, anyways, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming out. The chat was flying today. We appreciate you guys. Love talking to you. And you guys make the show a lot better, so we appreciate it. So, anyways, thanks, guys. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you on Thursday night. Have a good weekend, guys. Good weekend. A good week, I guess. We'll talk to you.
Yeah, it's Monday already.